All right. Yeah. Sorry for the delay, everybody. Welcome aboard our first Redspin Sports live stream. Up here,
Hold on.
Nate Wallace, Jersey
It's
City.
setting
Mike,
it up. 1 second. It's setting it up. And
it says now streaming for me, but
yeah, we're good.
all right. Yeah. Hey, so welcome aboard. I hope this is if we're having any issues, let me know in the comment section. But we want to get into, especially tonight. Again, I'm up here in Jersey City and with my co-host Mike Sampson down in Jacksonville. What's going on in college football? Because this is like a lot bigger than just sports, and that's sort of the premise of the whole show we do here. But I think right now, in particular, people and the way the media is framing a lot of this is really missing the bigger point. The idea of amateurism is being probably forever exploded and blown up, and that's honestly by and large a good thing in terms of taking on exploitation. We all have sentimental attachments to things and grow up certain things, attachment to symbols and logos and fandom and stuff like that. But when you really look at what this pandemic has done, it's opened up it's just like laid bare the contradictions of especially college football being the biggest revenue maker. I mean, is it the responsibility of college athletes, their unpaid laborers, right, to save the budgets of these athletic departments essentially by allowing major college football, the Power Five conferences of the SEC, the Big 12 and the ACC to continue playing? We've already had the Pac-12 on the West Coast and the Big 10 canceled. And Mike, I mean, you can hop in on this, but I think it's no accident that the Pac-12 is also where you had the most player militancy. You had players that were, threatening to cancel the season, and also talking about, having collective bargaining rights and not just being treated as, quote, student athletes. And the biggest thing that blows the lid off of it is the fact that the talk of having to potentially bring these student athletes, as they call them, back on campus. While not all schools are opening up campus for everybody else, it shows they are a special class of workers. The whole idea of amateurism is, a bygone thing at best, and has always been exploitative at worst. And quite frankly, a lot of players just don't recognize fully their power, and it's like they also just see the short term. People want to play. You've been conditioned your whole life to have an opportunity to play. It's a game you love, and a lot of people that aren't part of that, it's hard to understand when you look at the circumstances. But Mike, why don't you jump in and kind of just see, what your general reactions to what's going on, and kind of what you think what makes it significant.
And yeah, it's been a pretty wild last month in college football, especially. I mean, all over the world, but especially here in regards to sports, and especially with college football, we saw. From the springtime, we saw a big push by certain coaches, certain athletic departments, certain conferences like the SEC, the ACC, kind of leading the charge to play. COVID be damned. We have to put, butts in the stands. We have to go back to maximum capacity for stadiums. We have to get these players on the field and, really, win a championship or whatever, however they rationalize it. Of course, you saw Lou Holtz compared, former football coach, kind of right winger, professional spitter. He was comparing the college football, going back to college football to us, to the U.S., storming the beaches of Normandy, not really fully understanding, I guess, even that invasion. Was a very dumb military tactic in which like scores and hundreds of soldiers got wiped off the face of the map because you literally, what I mean? So I guess it's very symbolic to COVID, in the sense that you're trying to send all these players out there to, to risk illness and whatnot. I mean, I think we've seen it as things, I guess, were quote unquote getting back to a more normalcy. You saw a lot of these players who, of course, you can't separate the George Floyd rebellion from even the attitude that a lot of these players had. They had just seen, a month of protest, a month of people taking to the streets, a month of people using their collective voices to push policy changes, to push, for a total kind of upheaval in the system. And what you're seeing in college football is a perfect example of that now, starting at Washington State University. Washington isn't, of
So
that state. Um,
we talking about Washington State with Cassidy Woods, the wide receiver. What
yeah, it
happened to him?
started
Yeah,
there. That was kind of
yeah.
the root of it. Washington
So
State Cougars, in the Pac-12, players coming together with a pretty awesome kind of list of demands in regards to COVID safety measures, but as well calling for a players union,
yeah.
a
If I
national
hey,
college football players union.
Mike, if I could just interject real quick, Cassidy Woods was also the receiver who's from Texas who spoke out about, he was part of that. He signed on to it, but his coach was cool with him opting out for like personal reasons, family reasons, having to do with health. He had family members pass away from COVID already. But once it became clear to the new head coach, Ralovich, I believe his name is, that he was also concerned about, social issues. And not just the COVID stuff. He said that's going to be a problem. And then it was like, you got to clean your locker out. And there's news stories out on that and whatnot. So, I mean, continue. I just wanted to make sure that context was added.
No, 100%. And Nate, look at the chat.
Yeah.
100%. That car is, you had, like this, this prototypical American response of clean out your locker. We can find more of you. Not understanding that, let's say you had hundreds of players in all these teams that signed on to these pledges and this demand. And let's say you kick all of them off. I mean, there's a reason why these players are recruited to these colleges. It's because these colleges want these players because they're good at that sport, and they put butts in the stands, and they add more revenue to these programs. I mean, I saw an article today where LSU talked about if football isn't played, the university will lose $80 million. And according to my recollection, it's much more than that. Think about the revenue that small business owners around the stadium would lose. Think about the revenue that the school would lose if no college football is played, and that, to our assessment, shows the monetary value of the labor that these college football players create. Wasn't it Scott Frost with Nebraska who
He
threatened?
pitched a massive fit.
He
I mean,
pitched a
if I
massive
were the
fit.
Big Ten commissioner, Warren, you just get this job, and then you got them coming at you like that when you make a big decision. I mean, I'd almost want to kick him out
Well,
the league, quite
well, he
frankly.
pitched a fit, but then also while he was pitching the fit, he talked about the amount of money. I think it was like hundreds of millions of dollars that college football, or
Mm-hmm.
at least the Big Ten produced, in regards to revenue. So
Right. So he
essentially,
inadvertently let the cat out the bag, right?
you're telling it's like these are like naked capitalist entrepreneurship, whatever. So they're like telling you, we're going to lose $150 million if these football players don't hit the field. Well, what do you think that tells the football players?
Right.
Wow, my value is worth my labor is worth $150 million, yet I get $0 out of that. The
Right.
scholarship money I do get is just a max on all the grant money that I could get already, that other students could possibly get too. So these
Mm-hmm.
college players, I know that they're getting exploited, and what you've seen is this explosion of college football player activism, which is having a huge effect across the terrain of college football. And you had these two conferences, the Big 12 and the Big 10, decide we're not going to play college football this year, citing safety reasons and whatnot. So of course, these conferences, think about the Pac-12 and the Big 10, the institutions, the kind of more liberal college institutions, Stanford, what was it, Northwestern, some of these universities, Penn State, Ohio State, these are universities that pride themselves in their intelligence, so blah blah blah.
I don't know about Ohio State so much.
Ohio State,
It's a good school, but their fans are more like they're like the Alabama of the North, sort of, But
yeah, well,
yeah,
I guess
I
Ohio,
understand your point,
I
though.
guess so.
Yeah.
I guess Ohio is Alabama of the Midwest. But kind of going back to that, you know, you saw these premier kind of leagues of, public universities and private universities saying that we're not going to play football due to safety. In reality, we all know that they essentially what they did was did a lockout, you know. Um, and all, you know, in terms of labor terms, if the, you know, if workers are coming together to organize and, you know, threatening strike, essentially what the players were threatening. If we play, we need to get this. And they threatened to withhold their labor, which is a strike. And what did the universities do as a result of that? They said, we're not playing football. And they timed it and used it to say that, oh, it was safety reasons. But in reality, it was just a glorified lockout. And it gives
Right.
them, and in their calculation, it gives them time to rearrange the deck, get rid of the problem actors, and figure out who wants to play. In reality, think about it. They're proposing play start in the spring. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So think about how
Well,
pissed off athletes are going to be. You're making them play in the spring, potentially play in the fall after that. And then you have players like Justin Fields, like Sean
right.
Wade, cornerback of Ohio State.
Right.
Sean
Yeah.
Wade from Jacksonville,
From
Florida, actually.
Jacksonville, Florida. Yeah.
He could have left college this year and win in the first round, but he chose to
Absolutely.
stay in college. But now he can't play. You think he's going to stay till the spring and play football? No, he shouldn't do that. So I think what we're seeing is a total realignment. You know, we've seen this kind of, we haven't seen like a realignment, you know, in terms of society. You know, like Trump is still in office. You know, you still have these fascists, you know, in the White House trying to criminalize BLM and Antifa and all this shit. You still have these, you know, you still have a lot of fucked up shit happening, but you have seen a realignment in regards to this country is not the same place it was a year ago or even 2 years ago. So what you're
Right.
seeing is this realignment that came from the national level with this, you know, national rebellion. It's affecting every sector of society, and college football is a part of that sector as well that's being totally realigned. And you may see the end of the NCAA, you know, in terms of
All
college
right.
football after this.
Yeah, so to hop back on, I mean, you brought up a lot of important stuff, and I just want to piggyback on a few things. I mean, there's there's outbreaks going on already where students are back on campus. It's like UNC Chapel Hill had another cluster just announced a few hours ago. You got players at Auburn University. I know Seth Williams and Anthony Schwartz talking about, you know, that the social distancing. They're not seeing people wearing masks and whatnot. So there's no real way you can have just some totally contradictory, medical expertise from the Big Ten versus what the SEC is saying. The reality is that they have different political dynamics in their states, and this is where state and local like government and politics really does matter more on a national scene. A lot of people think like you know about the NFL, the NBA. You have these like commissioners, and they have they have a clear centralized power structure and a hierarchy. College football is very decentralized, right? Each of these conference commissioners acts as if like they're their own basic czar of their own little universe. And I always find it funny that everything in this country we want to like develop something for, we want to call it czar. So it's the drug czar, right? It's the whatever czar we had a few years ago, the election czar. You know, we need to. We probably do need an election czar actually in general, but just we love using that.
You remember the shit before Russiagate happened? When Obama was president, you know, he had Van Jones come on as the green job czar.
Right, that's right. The green job czar.
And then Glenn Beck was like, "Oh, he's a communist czar," you know. And then now, like all the like liberal Democrats are all calling everything czar Russian, you know. So that's
yeah. It's funny how that goes, definitely. But it just in general though, now what people don't understand and what the contradiction is happening now is so many players are saying we want to play, right? And I think some people are interpreting that to mean like that they're just cool with being exploited and everything's like, you know, they don't have any consciousness about what's happening. Look, you can understand 18 to 22-year-olds like, you know, the being in the best shape of their life, wanting to play, but it also like not being the right thing to do in terms of public health. But at the same time, they're not just saying we want to play and just like we're cool with the way everything is. It's there's the reality is they're not even being brought to the table to talk about potentially, you know, developing like a bubble, like such as, you know, quite frankly, the NBA has had a pretty successful restart, but they've had to take really draconian measures to like, make that happen, right? And they so you got to question like the amount of resources you're going to have to expend. I mean, let's look at Florida State just this past week, our alma mater. And you got Warren Thompson, wide receiver, tweeting out, I'm tired of all the lies. You got, also Tamorian Terry echoing that. You got DJ Matthews confirming the wide receiver too that he's got COVID. Florida State's not even releasing the numbers. I mean, so they're not even. It's not even about the HIPAA laws that a lot of schools are hiding behind and acting as if they care so much about student privacy. But although I mean that they do have to comply with that. It's they simply are trying to just control all the information. Keep these players sort of like in the lane they're conditioned to be in, and act as if anybody that's like stepping out of line, that's questioning things is somehow like a distraction to the team. You play team sports from a young age. You have it drilled into you that it's all about the team and it's all about there's no I in team and all this stuff. So your whole essence of your being, if you play team sports, is about like self-sacrifice. Now they're exploiting the fact that these young athletes like do care about their teammates, do care about the collective in a noble sense, in a way that's like, you really want to like, achieve something, accomplish something, work for a common cause together. And to flip it to be like, well, if you have issues with the pandemic, if you're trying to agitate for, name, image, and likeness should not even be a discussion. That doesn't even cost them anything. And it really shows the hubris of these schools that like, they're not even capitulating on that. But we haven't had like the threats that you had from the Pac-12 coming out of like, players in the Southeast yet. And it's no accident that, this football season has been canceled on the West Coast. In the Midwest, I think there were a number of factors involved. I mean, there's, clearly you had different university presidents that had that felt more strongly about it. But the biggest thing is not player safety, and it should be, and it should be about the overall health of the students. But college football in this country has takes up an outsized space in terms of its like role. Like people don't understand it. They think like, oh, these college coaches make so much. It's outrageous. I agree, they do. But the larger issue is college football revenue is financing a lot of what these universities are doing, not the other way around. Like some people had this whole idea that like somehow money's being taken out of their tuition without to finance college football. When really it's like they've developed a system now where college football athletes are supposed to work for free to finance, the non-revenue sports, right? And whatnot, their athletic departments. And then that helps them amp up their school. There's studies every year that show the team that wins the national championship in college football experiences a huge spike in applications. And we all know that these application fees aren't cheap, when you apply for colleges. So, or if you have, and I don't want to assume anything, but it's so it's no accident. There's a huge windfall that comes with winning. And even if you don't win a national title, there's still, a lot of exposure you get. So for the school, they always have those spots, those 30-second ads during, big time games. You see like, the little ad where they got the superficial diversity, it'll be like, oh, what's a university? We're innovating. We're engineers. We do this. And it's sort of like a little propaganda piece for every school. So anyways, Mike, wherever you want to take it. But
no, just the funniest part was there was a top college football corner from Virginia Tech, Caleb Farley.
Yeah.
Probably possible first round pick. He decided to opt out of this year. And, he said he did it, his family took a train for the draft and all reasonable reasons, like you don't want to, especially the way these athletes haven't been able to really train like usually you would, what I'm saying, if it was a regular year, so why would he risk his body is how he makes his money, it's how he's going to make his money. That's kind of the orientation of athletics with people who are really good at it. Your body is your temple and you have to protect it. So why would you waste it this fall or get injured this fall during COVID for free when you could just train next year to get drafted and be a professional athlete? The other thing he brought up was how lax Virginia Tech and Justin Fuente who's the head coach with COVID and how they handled COVID. He said he was in a practice field with like 80 teammates. Nobody was wearing a mask, weightlifting sessions, no protocols and whatnot. And this is a guy who's like, well, he lost his mother to cancer. You don't want to, you know what I mean? Like, you don't want to lose loved ones by you carrying this, but also the institution bears a lot for the safety of the players too. So why would he put himself in that position to be hurt or to even catch COVID? And I think that draws us to a broader point in regards to the player safety. And then, there's been conversation in regards to, oh, they care about COVID. Why don't they care about concussions and all this shit? Well, fuck, they should care about concussions. Maybe that adds to the conversation. Maybe instead of saying, oh, they're hypocrites, they, like there's been this huge right wing lie that's been going on about how it's the liberal media that is the reason why college football isn't happening, as opposed to
Right.
the policies of the Trump administration and the lackadaisical approach and complacency of the Democrats in leadership to fucking do anything about this pandemic, that there wasn't a national mask mandate, unlike places in like China, for example, in which they paid people to stay home, paid people to lock down so they can completely rid themselves of the virus. This decentralized kind of, like this is a capitalist imperialist country, markets run everything, and you can't have a market economy. You can't have a market economy with social distancing, because these bloodsuckers think very short term. They're not thinking about what's going to happen next year, because if that was the point, then climate change and a lot of the other shit we deal with as a society wouldn't be a factor. They care about the next day, the buck. How's the stock market looking? How's my value looking? So because of that, you saw a pure decentralized nationwide approach to how you deal with COVID and the pandemic. You saw that same lack of leadership from the NCAA with a lot of these college programs, these conferences, and as a result of that, you're seeing this kind of what were you saying, Nate? What was it called? A regionalism.
Yeah, regionalism. And it ties into like federalism in terms of the way the U.S. does everything, where the states share power and all that, and you don't have a centralized.
Like a big anti-federalism push by these conferences. I mean, and I mean that's the fabric of the country. So like,
well, essentially a pro-federalism. Ironically, it sounds like, but it's like it's technically the people that strive to that are like the people that want more states' rights.
Society is like a right wing that makes decentralization. Yeah,
right.
But you're seeing that approach being put forth in all levels, especially when it comes to college football, as opposed to the NFL. It's still 32 individual corporations that can set their own rules and set, but you have a kind of more of a general centralized mechanism, and you have the players do have a seat at the table in regards to the NFLPA and an elected representatives to represent their interests at the table.
And not to mention, guys who didn't opt out still get paid like a severance basically, and there's like unlike college football, right?
Yeah, like in college football, if you opt out, you better hope you're going to be a first round pick, because these like think about the peer pressure that these players are in. Let's say they had a family member that had COVID, but they're the one that was able to make it out and go to your University of Alabama and play for Nick Saban. Like think about that. Like, what pressures they are under to play, because if they don't play, they risk like sacrificing, I guess, the past 8 years of training and whatnot that they did for this opportunity. And that's the thing about athletics. People don't really understand. I think people understand it, but don't really understand it to that extent. Like everything is right place, right time, 1 out of a million for these kids. You know what I'm saying? Like, people live their whole life to be, you're groomed from you were 11 to play football. You're not.
I mean, talk about what you played at Jackson. You had a lot of guys from there that went on to play Jackson High School in Jacksonville, Florida. A lot of guys from your high school went on to play Division I college ball. And but the ones maybe who didn't, who had great issues, like how was that last game your senior year? Like when certain guys have that realization that have invested so much of their identity, some of your teammates, into football, like, and then the realization that like this is forever over now. Like it hits. Like you described, like, because I think that some people maybe they haven't grown up in this, they don't empathize this. It's just it's devastating. And someone like me, I've coached at a rival school and like I've dealt with that. But Mike, I think it'd be cool to hear you.
It's like if you ever want to see almost grown men cry. Just go to the last football game. These these high school football games. You know, like
Mm-hmm.
that was the first time I've seen people like cry. You know what I'm saying? These people supposed to be warriors. You know, I'm a banger. I hit you. You know, I'm a football player. They lose that game in the playoffs, man, or they don't even make it to the playoffs. The last game that they know they're not going to play, they start boohoo crying and feeling all types of emotion because of what the game represents to them.
Right.
You
And
can't
also
just kind of,
their identity, they don't really
yeah,
have, they don't know how to define themselves. And that's part of the tragedy of this, that we create a system that makes from a young age, so many young in a huge numbers, like large black males in the college football context, feel that their value is only, sort of,
your value is
yeah,
tied to who you are as a player.
is
Yeah,
tied to who you are as a player. And that's not, you can blame that on individuals all you want, but the reality is that it's socially
oh, that's
conditioned.
completely.
All these blindside movies, right? And stories romanticizing the rags to riches, like, making it out the hood motif and all that. I mean, it's not like just an individual failing, right? I mean, it's a socially constructed, romanticized, like, ideal for how you can escape, and it's also meant to be like, yo, you don't got nothing to complain about, because if you keep your nose down, you stay off the streets, you hang out with the right people. I mean, I think Allen Iverson's a great example of that. There's a great movie about Iverson told in his own words, it's out on Showtime now, if you have that. And it basically goes that Iverson from a young age was like, I mean, off the charts in football. Like, he was Michael Vick before there was Michael Vick. And it was like these racist, white folks, and you look down at like the Newport News, Virginia Beach, Hampton Roads area, Virginia, at a bowling alley, that, a fight that he, like, clearly, I think, left before, and wasn't even a part in. And there was the railroading of a judicial system meant to, like, put him back in his place, because they were, like, upset about, him, feeling like he was too uppity and all this sort of stuff. And you have a whole system that can, like, come down on you and rip that away from a young age. I mean, but to get back real quick to, like, this college football stuff in the here and now and the present, because you can look back at cases like Iverson and so many others going back, and fortunately for him, one guy, John Thompson from Georgetown University, still was willing to give him a second chance, and he got to college and then able to end up being a number one overall draft pick by the 76ers. But a lot of people don't know how great Allen Iverson, the football player, was. And
He was awesome.
He was unbelievable. So, but there's a guy at Duke University who's got a podcast called The End of Sport, and I highly not just him, but just a couple others, Derek Silva and also Johanna Mellis, and they've been discussing, like, in the context of this podcast started once the quarantine kind of began in April. So it's called The End of Sport. Like, there were no sports going on, and they analyze things from their academics. And I know Nathan, who I talked to a lot, is at Duke, and they wrote a piece in the Guardian, and it says canceling the college football season is about union busting, not health. And it gets into the we want to play, a group of college football players, like, lobbying to be allowed to play. You got Hunter Reynolds, who's from here in North Jersey, who plays at Michigan, helped found the College Athlete Unity, which is, like, kind of inspired by what people like Colton Kane did, the former Northwestern quarterback, who's now a teacher organizer out in Colorado, actually. So he's continued that activism. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it really is. So they had him on recently. Highly recommend checking that interview out, because you'll see the genesis of a lot of this. And, like, they came very close to getting, like, National Labor Relations Board approval. And the reasons for it not going through were they're more superficial. They didn't really rule against them. They just, like, decided not to take up the case and make a decision on it. But anyways, like, in the article, the three of them from The End of Sport, right, in the Guardian, like, canceling the season has less to do with athlete safety and more to do with anxieties over the organization of college athletes, collegiate athletes in mass. As UCLA defensive lineman Otito Ogbania, a leading member of We Are United, the Pac-12 group, and signatory of the recent letter they made to Pac-12 Commissioner Larry Scott, told them, that is, it's hard to guess what someone else is thinking, but it seems like the conferences basically decided to succumb to all the challenges of the virus, and now they are faced with the threat of a union or players association. So it's funny that without the threat of amateurism being on the chopping block, it was like, let's use these protocols. Let's try to press forward. We can do this safely. And how quickly the tune changes out west, and I would just urge, student athletes down south, you don't even have to say we don't want to play. You can still push the we want to play, but we want to play with conditions. And I think, and honestly, I don't think the season should happen, but I think that if that's what they feel, I would support them on that, right? Because it would be obviously people could opt out, and it would be an actual unionization effort. Then it would be something that could transform the sham that is amateurism, and how that serves to fortify and strengthen the position of these ruling class assholes that are the reason our country's in this position right now, and our politics are in this position right now, that use these college football programs as ways to invest in their philanthropy, to gain sort of prestige, to kind of attach themselves to something, to have a legacy, and to build their, further their power in society. And we all know that the 1% or even 0.01% are getting wealthier and wealthier, while people are taking home less and less pay. So this dynamic has got a lot of contradictions and complexities to it. But let's not forget that the NFL is testing every day. All right. Now, at Florida State, part of the reason those wide receivers that spoke out, and it'll be interesting, I want to follow up to see how they're being treated, because I don't think Warren Thompson's been invited back. I think Florida State's kind of moving on. But they were saying that they were testing once a week, but they weren't even really doing that. And then they also weren't releasing them. So the players on the team aren't sure, is the person I rode with in the car yesterday, does he have COVID? Do I not have COVID? The fact that stuff's not being abundantly transparent is majorly concerning.
It's a microcosm for all of it.
Go ahead and elaborate.
It's a microcosm for every, like you said, college football is a social schism. The brother you bring up, Warren, Thompson, his name, Florida State University, who's talking about lack of testing for COVID. Bro, think about all the hospitals, all the teachers going back into the classroom who aren't going to be aware if a student has COVID in the class, that they're just not going to see them the next day. And the bureaucracy that will be ill-equipped to deal with this in an efficient manner and let people know that they need to get tested. What you're seeing in college football, like the title of this live stream is a microcosm for all the schisms and all the issues we're seeing with the pandemic worldwide, in every workplace, everything we do, because what's going to happen is you're going to have players like Xavier Thomas and from Clemson, who actually caught COVID, was a safety, a pretty good player, who's missing the whole year because of a heart condition. So you're going to ask these college football players to potentially put their bodies at risk for free. The name, image, and likeness thing. You have Florida and the Governor Ron DeSantis and the legislature passed that, be the first state in the country to pass the players' right to use their name, image, and likeness to make some money. The fact, this is straight up bullshit, and a lot of intellectuals and college educated intellectuals look down on college football, think they have it so much better than everybody else. If you're good at math and you get a full scholarship, you're getting a bunch of scholarship money, you're living good as well. The problem is no one's dictating to you your academic affairs. What was it, former Florida State top recruit out of Lincoln High School in Tallahassee, Fred Rouse.
Explain the history, explain the back, because Fred Rouse's story is a microcosm of so much of what college football.
Fred Rouse was the number one. Yeah. He had two choices: Florida State, USC. He chose Florida State. Lincoln High School was supposed to be a great college wide receiver. It didn't work out for him. One of the things,
mind you, that was USC of Reggie Bush era. That was USC of Matt Lyon and Reggie Bush all then, right? So.
Yeah, but then but think about it. At the time, he was told that he could only major in social sciences, and we all know what social sciences is as a major. Think about all the players who go to these, that they always say, oh, they're there for their scholarship, they're there to learn and get a degree. Then they don't have fucking time to focus on academia. You know what I'm saying? If they want to be a great player. You don't have the time to focus on academia if you want to be a great player, because the demands on you during a season is unlike any other demands that any student has to deal with. Waking up at 5:30, going to workouts, going to class, going to practice, and then having a usually some coach up your ass, making sure that you where you at and all the time. You know what I'm saying? So they don't live the same college experience as a regular student. However, their labor that they put out every Saturday is the reason why you have all these upgrades on college campuses. Is the reason
Mm-hmm.
why these college campuses have so much money in endowments and funding and all that shit. It's because of the labor that these college athletics produces, especially college football. So whenever you have somebody looking down, like a student or whatever, any of
Right.
these fucking dweebs looking down on these athletes and what they produce, they literally
Mm-hmm.
just said that they produce LSU talking
Right.
about they'll lose $80 million. It's LSU. If LSU didn't play football, Baton Rouge, LSU would lose a hell of a lot more than $80 million. But
Right.
let's just say that $80 million. How many kids on the team who actively play? Maybe 50. So those 50 kids are producing $100 million for a city.
Yeah.
What is the average student producing? Like, what is any of these
Yeah.
dweebs who look down on college football players? What are they producing when they
Right.
were in college? And
It
also, these
yeah.
athletes, they can't just get a job like
Right.
during the
It is their
football
job,
season to
quite
make
frankly,
money.
and
It
it's a
is their
job that
job.
yeah.
They don't get paid for it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Which is why you have situations in which these college athletes they fucking
Look.
they do stupid shit sometimes to make money. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And that's because there's not a system set up to reward them, or not even reward, for them to get what the fuck they earn on
Right.
Saturday. At
Right.
least some of it, you know.
No.
And
So I want to give it. Yeah. Go
yeah,
ahead.
no. And also the craziest part about it is, I think the right wing has kind of used this college football joint as like a part of the culture war. That's kind of what they go to when it comes to election. We support college football. Playing the liberals don't. But it's funny because Donald Trump shared that Trevor Lawrence tweet about we want to play Players United. Are the what are the demands on that? Is establish universal mandated health and safety procedures and protocols to protect college athletes against COVID-19. It's funny as shit because Trump isn't for that. Give players the opportunity to opt out and respect their decision. Guaranteed eligibility whether a player chooses to play the season or not. And that's a big one. Think about it. You have players who go to these colleges on scholarships. If they don't play to the way that the coach wants them to, best believe those coaches push them out of those programs, which is why you have players who have to transfer to smaller schools and all that jazz. So when they said the scholarship is a 4-year thing, no, it's a 1-year contract that these coaches really sign with these players. If you're good, you can stay. If we see promising you can stay. But if you suck, I'm sorry, you got to hit the road because we're trying to recruit some kid in Jacksonville who's faster than you and can be a better player. So that's a
Hey,
big one.
Mike. So Derek Silva just commented. He's one of the authors of the Guardian piece.
Oh, awesome.
I was just I was just mentioning there, and my bad. I was looking at the other screen to see me still talking,
Nah.
but I mentioned to act like athletic laborers are students first is utterly laughable, and I just wanted to just like build on that. It's just like he was one of the co-authors, like I said, of the piece in the Guardian about like how it's about union busting. It's not about player safety. This what the Pac-12 did, and what it brings down, it makes me think of like the criticisms I grew up hearing. People talk about Deion Sanders, like not going to class at all his last semester at Florida State. I'm starting to be like, who cares? And I'll give credit to them at the end of Sport Pod. The people that say that, man. No, they are academics, and they constantly take their colleagues to task for the type of like just dismissive comments they make about student athletes. I mean, I know one of them, Nathan at Duke was saying that you constantly hear it's like there needs to be more engagement to get the student athletes more engaged in their academics and whatnot. And it's a very paternalistic, patronizing idea that like we think we know you're just here because you're a great athlete and and blah blah but I'm here. This is an institution of this is an academy and institution of higher learning, and you're going to conform or you're not. Reality is you are producing. I mean, the Duke basketball player or even football player that's notable is like producing a ton more value in terms of like what's going on economically. So if you want to play it from just like a capitalist economic standpoint and who's producing more wealth, I don't want to pit like people against each other and all this sort of stuff. Like that's not my objective here, but it's just like to point out the hypocrisy in some of academic, the sort of like people that are professed to be progressives, right? Professed to have these great concern about what goes on in minority communities and the oppression of people of color in the US and around the world. But suddenly when it's in their own backyard, when it's in their English class or it's in their social science class, right? They suddenly have a major problem with like, and look, it's okay to have a problem with the fact that you think the athletic department are bringing them in, maybe setting them up to fail. You're just trying to kind of pat them along. And it's like, maybe you feel that goes against the mission of academia, but stand in solidarity for like, to help change that and to criticize like the power structure that's like facilitating that dynamic, then to sit there and like try to, I've like tutored and like worked and mentored and like, dealt with so many college athletes and they were just like so depressed that like they were hopelessly behind. They'd gone to failing schools. They've been, growing up having to take care of little brothers and sisters, like trying to find a way to keep their families together, sometimes living out of cars. They get to college, they've achieved like, a big part of their dream, quote, making it out, part of that journey. And then suddenly it's like they're overwhelmed. And then it's like they're also on top of that being taught to in a real condescending manner, as if like, they're privileged or something because they're like, oh, you think that you're a football player, like if you're late to class one day, suddenly it becomes something way bigger than just one day being late to class. And it really wears down a lot of these people. So, I mean, like Fred Rouse, look, I'm not saying he certainly probably made mistakes, but, you got to look at the context of like our society building up and hyping up a Fred Rouse. I mean, he was one of the biggest recruits, this is about the mid 2000s, you'll ever have. And you have a whole industry of sports writers and beat people that go around covering each of these high school games, going to all the camps, the rivals camps, going to the Nike camps, the Under Armour ones, and U.S. Army All-American game and whatnot, building these guys up on a pedestal, but then it profits to watch them fall down too. Because there's always some new crop coming in. And until players are able to like come together and really like be willing to sacrifice like, what's right there, in front, like the short term, which quite frankly, the season's not even going to like happen when it gets down to. We're already seeing it at Chapel Hill. We're seeing it in Oklahoma right now, where they had a spate of tests just come back positive. If students coming back on campus, it's just a joke. The idea that what they're going to do, and again, I'll give credit to Derek and Nathan and Johanna. They've been pointing out that this whole like this notion of healthism, it's what universities are falling back on. The idea that it's your individual responsibility to, avoid, getting exposed to COVID, right? To like to follow all the protocols. We've done nothing wrong, right? But we brought you onto campus. We've created a dynamic that's a super spread dynamic. Like the reality is by bringing all the other students back on, like, which quite frankly, I suspect like a lot of reason they're doing that is to avoid the potential of there just being the college football players there and the undeniably like visible, like just
a combination
reality of like there are workers on campus with no one else getting paid. They bring them on there.
It's a combination of it. It's a combination of like multiple. It's like you have to have players on. You have to have students on campus in order to justify having players play football. But as well, like we've talked about on previous episodes, the higher educational industrial complex of which these developers, these apartment complex owners, all this kind of like development capital that has been created based on, more enrollment of students. It relies on people being at schools. Right. Restaurants, these like Aramark, these contracts,
the cafeteria, the food plans, right?
They fucking rely. They need students there. So even if they're wearing a mask, as long as they're there spending money,
they're like vampires sucking the blood. Like the profit. Like basically these 100%. Administrators, these schools are vampires, and the students are what they feed on to sustain this system, this higher ed industrial complex. Right?
But the thing is, you even bring that back to even regular education, like in Jersey. Y'all are starting off all virtual in regards to class.
Right, and that's not until after Labor Day,
Yeah, but down here in Georgia and Florida, they're trying to have people go to straight up class.
Absolutely.
And you can't subtract, like, in my opinion, it's like, when I analyze these decisions, you can't subtract like the economic and, capitalism's motive for these policy decisions. So I think about these contractors, these food contractors, janitorial contract service providers who have these contracts with these school districts. Think about the charter schools that have all these contracts with these different vendors, these different companies, that if there aren't students at those schools, they don't make money, you know. And essentially that brings us back to where we even started at. You can't have a pure capitalist free market economy if you have social distancing, if you have if you care about safety. You can't really have a free market capitalist system.
Capitalism is diametrically opposed to the things that need to happen in order to beat this pandemic. And we're seeing
100%.
That's the reason when we talk about constantly just getting mad at some teenagers at a party or kids at the beach or whatever, gathering at a house party. All right, yeah, it's irresponsible. But that's missing the larger point. It's letting a system off the hook. It's screwing the postal service. It's like privatizing stuff. It's been doing this for decades, nonetheless. If you want to let's just start with Reagan in the 80s as an example to see a clear break from the old New Deal politics of the post-World War II generation. And this has been going on. And now we're in a pandemic that requires solidarity. It requires people working together. It requires central planning. It requires there being clear and I guess consistently applied protocols nationwide, which is totally antithetical to right-wing ideology. And then you have a liberal class that's totally incapable of actually opposing them because they're accepting money from Silicon Valley, from big kind of hipster capitalists and big people that are cool with these sort of aesthetic liberal, like the Elon Musk.
No, I know what you're saying. It's so funny. I like that category, hipster capitalist.
So that's their interest. That's who they serve, along with Wall Street. You had the New Democrats and Bill Clinton kind of being symbolic of that. They started raising money in big numbers because they agreed to abandon the kind of New Deal sort of politics and pushing for instead welfare reform. What did we get? Welfare reform. Crime bill, acceleration of mass incarceration, just utter destruction. And people like Kamala Harris, right? They're a major part of that. Joe Biden, major part of that. And we're being told and shamed basically that if we don't just shut up and not even point these things out, then it's your fault if Trump wins. We all want Trump to be defeated. But this notion that people somehow year after year are told, right, that you just have to shut up and not say anything about the fact that they're just, consistently showing you that there is no opposition to the neoliberal order. And to point that out, suddenly it's you're the reason Trump's in there. No, the reason Trump's in there is because we don't have a labor party. We don't have a party that represents workers. And sadly, that's reflecting as it gets back to college football. That's exactly what they need in terms of they need a fighting union that's and the end result might be that they shut college football down and it does become a professionalized thing. And quite frankly, I think it would be that'd be the outcome that needs to happen because it's indefensible. I love the sport growing up around it. I mean, certainly there's memories and part of my growing up, but you break it down and take off the fan cap and just look at what's rationally happening. Even mainstream sports writers like Matt Hayes, who's been with the Sporting News and wrote for the paper in Jacksonville where we grew up for a long time. And anyways, it's been on this train, and about the player power that they have, and all it would take is, the guys at Florida State instead of Marvin Wilson. Jalen Large would be these different players. Essentially, the defense kind of took the teams back, the coaches and whatnot. Whereas, and they should have been out there.
Only the defense could,
They should have been out there saying no, we stand with Warren Thompson, right? But of course, they want to present this. They're thinking in a very limited, we want to win the ACC this year and those kind of goals, and they're missing the big picture, and it's really unfortunate.
100%.
A couple of things I want to get into. I want to get your take on Liberty University real quick because there's some stuff coming out now. And I was tweeting about this last night. You can follow this on at Redspin Sports on Twitter. I'm at Nate Wallace 9 and Mike's at Brother Flourish. But I try to tweet about these different things going on in college football as much as possible. Kind of bring these things to light. And essentially, Liberty University was founded by Jerry Falwell. It's Lynchburg University, Lynchburg, Virginia. Jerry Falwell is a disgusting like televangelist who died in 2007. Was talking to my friend and great supporter of the program, Max Blumenthal, last night, and he wrote a piece actually an obituary for Jerry Falwell in a satirical kind of way for The Nation in 2007. That if you want to Google Max Blumenthal, Jerry Falwell, The Nation or whatever, you'll find it. It's pretty funny. But this guy started segregation academies to avoid having to comply with Brown v. Board of Education. At that time, I learned from reading the article that essentially the pro-life movement, anti-abortion movement wasn't even that big in the Southern Baptists. It was sort of like limited to Catholics more so. But what happened in the 70s is sort of a reaction to the culture wars of the 60s was this like alliance. It used to be that Protestants and Catholics, you look at like Ireland, Northern Ireland, you see that's always like a kind of schism. In the US, it was too, and Kennedy ran for president. People were like, oh, is he going to be loyal to the Pope or America and stuff like that. But that all went away in the 70s when they kind of like solidified around this like anti-LGBTQ, anti-abortion culture war alliance. And especially when Carter became president and really like shut down tax exempt status to these segregation academies that popped up all throughout the South. That's exactly the context in which Liberty University was born out of. Liberty University has now moved up. They've gradually they've gone up the ladder. They're now part of Division I FBS. They have not even been testing for coronavirus. Just let that sink in. This is a D1 school who wants to be treated seriously. And I'll just say right now, it's my express hope that school, that program completely crashes and burns. No one schedules them. I mean metaphorically, of course. I'm not like advocating anything like that, but I really people need to start. It's funny how he's talking about tolerance. You always hear liberals say, "Well, we have to be tolerant of everybody." Well, we don't have to be tolerant of people who are inherently intolerant, right? Inherently bigots, right? So I'm tired of that kind of stuff. And if you look at what the experience of Black athletes at Liberty University, it's and you read the piece that's let me do this thing pulled up here for you, so I'm not giving you some context.
Side note, did you see that Rodney Gunter news for the Jaguars?
I did not.
No. He's retiring.
So now they're another hit to their D line. Yeah.
Yeah, he has an enlarged like heart or something.
Gotcha. Well, hey, stay well, Rodney Duncan.
Well, I guess what they
real quick, the piece I'm talking about, it's a Slate.com article by Joel Anderson, published on August 2nd. I'll put it in the show notes when we finish up. But real quick, Mike, it says Liberty University poured millions into sports. Now its Black athletes are leaving. And it talked about how in mid-June, the pandemic was surging. Their biggest recruit they ever had, Tavion Tank Land, was on campus. Was in a math class with half of his classmates. He basically had a professor tell him after he had, joked about something in class, made a comment and he told the player, "I'm not going to pull out my whip and hit you with it." Landed his teammates Black. The instructor there is white. This school is a school that's also had major issues. Jerry Falwell Jr., the son of the racist.
You know what city is in?
Lynchburg, Virginia. All right, so no. But go ahead, Mike.
Lynchburg, Virginia. No, I was gonna. What did I make up before? We had a player, Chris Summers, is a wide receiver at Reebok, went to Liberty University.
Oh yeah. He was a good player.
They had a player. His name is Antonio Gandy. I forgot his name. He caught COVID or something. He was like a wide receiver, got drafted this year. They've been trying to come up in athletics, and we've talked about this in previous. I feel like a lot of stuff we're referencing what we've talked about, how these institutions, they get football programs as a method to increase revenue to their universities.
Exactly.
Of course, Liberty University, as this, far right wing, Jerry Falwell started it, and now his son had to, take a.
Let's just call it what it is. They're Christian fascists.
Yeah, Christian fascists. Yeah. But yeah, they started the school and all this, bullshit propaganda. Even when COVID first happened, they had issues. You know what I'm saying? Because you remember there was a huge controversy about them not even enforcing social distancing and doing all this other jazz in the spring. and they sent home students actually late because there was an outbreak at the university, at Liberty University. And then, of course, the chancellor, Jerry Falwell's son, got in trouble because he was on a boat with another woman, and his belt was untied with alcohol in his.
Well, yeah, he said it's just really dark water, but with their pants zipped down, and then after the fact, like he's been actually suspended or whatever that means indefinitely by the university now.
Took a sabbatical, whatever.
A sabbatical, means. Right? Like, while this guy is on a boat, like he Instagrams this out on his own. And he says that like he's showing solidarity with like a pregnant friend by like, oh, she's having a hard time zipping her pants up. So I've gained some weight too. I can't zip. So let's just take a picture with our flies down. And I guess that's a good idea. Nonetheless, that's not really a point. Falwell Jr. also said, has also been quoted as saying here in the article that he's dreamed even bigger than his father, aiming to turn one of the nation's largest Christian universities into what Notre Dame is for Catholics and BYU is for Mormons, the home team for millions of believers. So that's the objective for the Liberty Flames. I mean, you look back at the history of this, it's just disgusting. I mean, I really recommend you going to check out the article. Like I said, I'll link to it when we finish up in the show notes. Slate.com. by Joel Anderson.
What's actually happened as a result? And like you can't forget who their head coach is. Hugh Freeze.
Turner Gill, I believe.
No, it's Hugh Freeze.
Oh, Hugh Freeze. Yeah, they fired Turner Gill. They got Go ahead and tell the folks what Hugh Freeze's legacy was at Ole Miss.
He was apparently he was a great high school football coach. Then became the Ole Miss
coach. Michael Orr was in that blind side.
Coach Michael Orr. Then he became the head coach at for the Rebels, in Oxford, Mississippi.
The Ole Miss Rebels. Yeah.
Ole Miss Rebels. And apparently he had an issue with escorts or sex workers.
Yeah. He was just using his university cell phone, to get his escorts lined up.
I mean, there's nothing.
Isn't that annoying when that happens? All these people, all these rules and stuff. You're just trying to get your escorts and peace and everything. And Hugh Freeze, and then
this is.
I'm joking, obviously.
Nate, we support those sex workers, and we support his right to text them. But you just can't use university property to do that, and also you can't lecture to your players, mostly black, about family values while you're cheating on your wife. So he ended up getting fired, and now and also. A lot of football players was getting paid at Ole Miss. Like Robert Kindici was one of their top recruits ever. You know what I'm saying?
What about Laramie Tunsil? I mean, he from Lake City, same high school, Timmy Jernigan. I coached against him a couple of years in high school, and I remember hearing stories after. Yeah. When he was in 9th grade and 10th grade, I remember as a 9th grader. He was he was 6'5", 265, 270, in 9th grade. Wow. I mean, I
didn't know he went to Columbia. He's back to it.
Mom got it. Remember, his mom got a house. They said.
Okay.
And car.
No, the funny. Liberty University, located in Lynchburg, Christian Fascist University, recruiting all these black players.
Lynchburg, Virginia.
To build, an icon and whatnot. I'm thinking. They spent in the last 4 years, they spent $150 million on athletic facilities, $20 million on an indoor field, $40 million on God knows what. They spent pouring a whole bunch of money into their football programs because they want to get the dividends. And also, you think about it, if this becomes the Notre Dame of Protestants, you know what I'm saying, or I guess Christian fascists or whatever, think about the support they would get. The funny thing is, their COVID denial is actually going to screw them over in the end because now you have ACC teams that are scared to play them who don't want to play them because of the lack of COVID protocols, because every conference and every team is supposed to have a very standard protocol. If they play another team, they have to be confident that that team is using the same kind of COVID protocol. And Liberty University.
I mean, are we sure about this though? I mean, because honestly, from what I'm hearing,
they're supposed to.
Supposed to in quotes. But the reality is that how are you going to test everybody right before the game? I mean, you think about this, test results are also not getting returned quickly. So after a few days, the test results are really kind of meaningless because you can't do contact tracing anymore, and you can't really pinpoint where you may have contracted it from. And so if you're out there weekly, and once they pads are on at the SEC, ACC, Big 12 schools, you're the amount of strain when you're blocking and trying to get off blocks and the stuff you're coming out of your mouth. There's just no way imaginable. It's one thing like golf, you can like socially distance pretty easily. Football is just by its nature not compatible with that.
Did you see that Marco Rubio tweet yesterday?
I did. Yeah,
a picture of like Antifa.
Yeah,
a picture of college football. Is like which one is actually
being encouraged
and being encouraged and safety. And my answer is like, well, in one picture, people are passing out concussions every play and CTE and like body injuries. It's a glorious sport. I love it, but that's just what's happening. These are athletes. They're hitting each other at a rate and at a force that is hurting people. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
That's on one, doing it for free. Then on the other one, you have people protesting for Black people murdered by the police. Much different, you know what I'm saying? But, and obviously, protest against police brutality and the white supremacist capitalist system we live under is not being encouraged by the media,
Or Marco Rubio,
Marco Rubio,
illustrious senator there, along with the.
But even I'll bring it back to even with COVID, and you brought up the testing, and you have to shout them out. The NBA Players Association, along with the NBA, and they actually help fund a saliva-based kind of testing protocol that's supposed to be really good, and that's something that the players came together and helped fund. So in a way, you see that the NBA. They've always had the strongest players union. They've always kind of actually had, of all the sports, they kind of are more militant. You watch a fucking NBA game, man. It's pretty amazing. You see the Black Lives Matter on the court.
I was more a fan of the education reform on the back of a few of those jerseys.
Did you see
that? Let's get into that for a minute. So Markieff and Markieff Morris and his twin brother, and 10 other players in the NBA. So if I would just love to be for give me like a week to be good enough, to be in the league, so I could go up there and make a big media scandal about how I'm going to put Free Palestine on the back of my jerseys and make them tell me no, and then go out in the court and then get kicked out the game, and then all the media coverage that would come with that. Because the idea of these social justice patches, they're not you can't just put what you want. The players do have more control, and they tout that it's more of a partnership in the NBA. But at the end of the day, though, if the Gaza Strip was bombed again last night, by Israel. The 2 million people who were just trapped in the world's largest open air prison, and no one really cares, right? And they're bombing during the pandemic. People are crying out for help, all again under the guise of somebody, rockets being fired, of course. And it's disgusting. But this whole reality with so much of this going on in the testing issues with going back to the NBA, the education reform stuff. That's allowed. The idea that charter schools privatizing higher public ed, as a social justice message, with no context, right? But God forbid you wanted to put Free Palestine on.
And I will be brutally honest. The problem with that is it kind of goes back to even the labor movement not taking a stronger stance when it comes to racism and national oppression and the persecution of Black and brown workers in this country. Right. Because think about it, for those who work in education, teachers, the demographics of it, the people who work in public schools, the workers themselves, they predominantly tend to be women and African American oppressed nationalities. You know what I'm saying? So education reform, charter school reform negatively hurts them. You know what I'm saying? Over proportionally, because in public sector jobs, women and minorities tend to be over proportionally represented as opposed to the private sector. The issue is now you have a lot of people A lot of like even African Americans who think of education reform and charters is like, oh, my school is shitty. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Because they aren't getting state resources like they should because this whole controversy around like defunding the police, the right wing has been defund, right wing and also
Yeah,
like
but it's also
center,
about like they're
liberal centrist.
frustrated about curriculum, right? Not covering
They're
like
frustrated about
African
what kids
American
are
history,
being
but
taught. No,
taught.
100%.
But let's reform the public school system, privatizing it and giving that over to a bunch of capitalists to play with. It's not your answer.
Yeah.
It's gonna be some
But I
woke
think,
identity politics BS.
but I think no, it's not. I think that's what happens.
Not even woke. I'm using that
No, it's
sarcastically.
not.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily think it's identity politics. I think it's what happens when you have a labor movement so detached from, let's say, the struggle for equality and democratic rights that oppressed nationalities feel. There's always been that separation of sorts, like you know, not that connection. That attacks on public education disproportionately hurts black and brown neighborhoods more than white neighborhoods. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
But
no, I
that's
was
why you
speaking just
have
to the
black.
charter. Yeah,
No, you're good. That's why you have black athletes like, oh, education reform because we need our own schools and shit like that. Well, just make the
yeah.
schools we have better. And then it brings me to our brother Jonathan Isaac.
Oh man,
I wish him the best.
he tore his
He was one of
ACL, man.
he was one of two players who didn't kneel. And even when he didn't kneel, you saw his speech afterwards, man. It was like about
I mean, it's
Jesus,
just I don't
like
even I can't even.
God told me not to
It was
kneel.
about how like his family came to the States and like it was a like immigrant family somewhere like and how like I don't even. It's just
He said the gospel. We have a gospel, and one. I don't know. Like, let me try to find exactly what he said.
But real quick, what I meant by identity politics is how the charter schools specifically and people that are there, like that align with
how
them,
they use
identity politics to be like,
100%.
oh, we're gonna have more multicultural like curriculum.
Yeah, 100%.
We're not gonna have like like they might point out to like a example of a teachers union local that like maybe isn't as inclusive as they should be in their leadership, or whatever, and then use that as a way to try to divide and conquer. So like that's kind of
no, 100%. No, 100%. No, you're right. You're spot on that. And I've always talked about how like identity politics. There's been so much on the. There's been so much like it's been weird, man. Because I think we've seen this rise. I'm kind of digressing, but let's stay on this since we're talking about identity politics. We've seen such a huge rise in like a natural criticism of identity politics in left spaces, which is most been accurate because, in my opinion, the class dynamics that are played are a predominant factor in regards to all these issues that we see. So you've seen this kind of denunciation of identity politics. Identity politics is moving the country to the right and all this shit. The thing is, white supremacy and the ruling class has historically used identity politics to their own ends. You know what I'm saying? To reinforce their rule in society, which is why, like you said, they're using it against black people to say that, oh, these public schools suck. They're not serving your kids right. You should support school choice. You should support voucher programs because it'll benefit the black community. And if the left doesn't have a substantiated kind of claim to really back that up, you know what I'm saying, or combat that narrative, you're going to keep losing and we're going to see more education privatized. But back on Jonathan Isaac, he didn't take a stand. He intentionally took his Black Lives Matter shirt off. And what happened? I mean, and it's unfortunate. He, tore his ACL. I never wish harm on anybody. It sucks to see
on anybody
except the ruling class. It sucks to see him. It sucks to see him kneel because he tore his ACL. He should have just kneeled because Black Lives Matter, but it didn't matter to him at that time. But whatever, I wish him speedy best. And the other guy who didn't kneel, he didn't kneel because he said he has parents in the military. Like, these motherfuckers are stupid, man.
When have they not got? I mean, how many times is it exhaustively said? I mean, like, I don't even care that. I think it's a stupid point to have to make. It's not about the flag. It's about police brutality. But let's just like say that. All right, it's not about the flag. It's about police brutality. And people still like coming at that, But
like, here's the thing. Here's the thing about even with the Jonathan Isaac situation. Like, we saw.
Who also went to Florida State, by the way.
Oh yeah. We saw what happened when he didn't. We saw what happened. What forces were hyping him up we're going to prop him up. I mean, he would have been in the White House with Trump.
Clay Travis, Jason Whitlock.
Yeah, he had like a top 5. I don't want to talk about Whitlock, but he had a top 5, a top 5 like jersey that week after he did kneel. So these right wing forces were going to use him as their black hope to fight against this BLM movement that is, Antifa and Marxist and all this shit. I wish the BLM movement was Marxist, but it most certainly is not. But and I think his plans, due to his knee injury, he's not going to be that for the right wing, and that's it is what it is. I wish him the best. But
yeah,
whatever.
Yeah, a few things. I want to just bring it back to college football real quick to really hammer something home. I brought this up on my weekly Redspin report on with Sean Blackman and Jackie Lukman. I do weekly on Radio Sputnik on By Any Means Necessary. Their show that airs from 2 to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday. I'm on there every Friday, and was talking about the different like political dynamics and like with regards to how it affects which conferences have canceled college football and which ones are still pressing forward. So let's look at like that's just an example I've looked into pretty heavily the last few days. And in Tallahassee, Florida, you have the president of Florida State University's John Thrasher. He used to be the president of the Senate, a Senate Majority Leader, and used to be the Speaker of the House in Florida. John Thrasher also has an AD in David Coburn, who's also was a right-wing legislator in Florida, who is very much aligned with Governor Ron DeSantis and like his sort of Jesus take the wheel, like just be optimistic for optimistic's sake COVID strategy of just, like, I guess, let everybody get infected. I mean, he literally said just like basically young people just need to get it and just try to get over it sort of thing.
Here's the fucking annoying part about DeSantis.
But I'm sorry, contrast that with, I guess, oh, go ahead.
Quick digression. He's doing press conferences every fucking day with different athletes. So he did a press conference at UNF with Lito Shepherd and a black football coach talking about the importance.
Oh, that's sad, man. I used to love Lito Shepherd doing it.
He did a press conference at Florida State that you're talking about. Like, it's just weird. Like, the right wing has identified college athletics as the means to get public support for their draconian policies against COVID. So they're fucking hitting it hard, you know what I'm saying?
And then co-opt certain black athletes who want to, who just want to play ball because that's what they do. They play ball, and like quite frankly, a lot of these dads are probably really bored. If it's distance learning, they have to go back to some small town in Georgia or wherever, and it's like, on that level, and just like when you're thinking purely like their life, and they've been kind of cooped up, like you can understand that. But what's happening is these right-wing politicians are exploiting that and co-opting the fact that like they want to play.
It's just, to me, that's the weird part, bro. Like, the weird part is like, Nick Saban talking about these kids are better at our facility than on the streets. And I'm just like, they still got a scholarship. Like, are they being sent home to like bumfuck like Kentucky or like, Lexington? Like, are they being sent home? Are they still allowed to even live in their dorms or live in their off-campus like dormitory? That doesn't make sense to me. You know what I'm saying?
Well, they're not being sent. I mean, I get on a very narrow sense. You can say like, okay, in a football facility where you can control like who comes in and out, and you have doctors available. Like, okay, yeah, you would have, and I think that you have probably better access to healthcare, be safer. But that's really more of a indictment of this system and how bad our healthcare system is. That like you have to be lucky enough to like get a lotto ticket, in terms of your athletic ability, but also work hard to develop it, to have a scholarship to be at a big time school that has access to all these resources that, quite frankly, are resources that aren't going in terms of like combating public health in the midst of a pandemic in the country that is like, unable to probably having the worst, results of any country in the world right now in controlling the pandemic, because you can't have any sort of policy. Trump can't, it goes against right-wing orthodoxy to, use the Defense Authorization Act, right? And to like mandate that these corporations, these companies start producing masks, PPE equipment, like things that are going to help people, basically turn it into like a national, like it's just like a war, World War II. You think of where like all industry was like, then converted to help support that effort. I mean, that's like really what kind of mobilization of resources you would need, but then that would contradict their ideology and their faith and like that, markets handle this better, that you don't want the government to interfere and all this stuff, and things. It's bankrupt. It doesn't add up.
I guess I guess, I mean, I think, in terms of wrapping up, and this, I mean, I think what COVID has done is accelerated so many contradictions that had already existed, like the contradiction with these athletes not getting paid, while these universities make buku money and these coaches get no fat contract extensions that makes them the highest highest paid public employee in these states. I think COVID has escalated and really exploited those contradictions and kind of brought it to a head. It's done that in college football. It's done that in the social sphere in regards to racism and national oppression. It's doing that in regards to even the culture war in regards to symbols of oppression. You know what I'm saying? I think we've seen, like the title of this live cast, college football as a microcosm for the schism in society. And I think the contradictions you're seeing in college football is the same contradictions you're seeing in all sectors of society that this virus has essentially brought to the forefront and propped up. And I mean, it's tragic what has happened with the virus, like what has happened in terms of lives lost, people impacted, like people suffering, and that's a horrible part. And we lay that at the feet of the negligence of the ruling class under Trump and whoever is in the Senate and the Congress for not doing shit about it. But as well, what we have seen is due to those accelerating contradictions, the opportunity for these players to organize and actually win like substantial changes for themselves and their future. You're seeing that in every sector of society. You got sectors, organizing that have never even organized before. So, right. So much darkness, but out of the darkness will come the light. And I think what we're seeing from these college athletes, the Pac-12 players, I think we're seeing a lot of light in the future.
Yeah, I mean, a shout out to the college athlete unity, guys. I mean, you had, Hunter Reynolds from Michigan. I wish I had the list of names right now. The safety from Minnesota. I'll look it up in just a second, but real quick, I know you were trying to close, and we do need to get there, but Tommy Tuberville, real quick, who was, I grew up with. I remember he was actually the guy, just to show you how right things are, that got Ole Miss fans to stop bringing the Confederate battle flag to games in '97, purely because he thought it hurt recruiting. He goes on to take the Auburn job in '99 after Terry Bowden's fired, and goes on a nice run, has a lot of success. But he's like, you look at his right-wing politics, and he's set to become the next U.S. Senator from Alabama, and just how far to the right he was, beating Jeff Sessions, getting the endorsement of Trump. And this is a guy that was, intimately involved in the lives of majority Black teams for years there at Auburn, at Texas Tech, at Cincinnati. And I think it's something we need to be aware of, just like how, at these programs, the kind of far right politics that maybe aren't explicitly expressed in terms of hey, go vote for Trump or whatever, but are manifest themselves in the way in which they interact and deal with players, and the way they discipline with players, the way they understand or don't understand certain behaviors from players. And and part of I think what players need to, work with in terms of developing unity and building solidarity is to start not being afraid to stand up to these people. They're a lot of them. I mean, they have to work really hard to bite their tongues to avoid getting in trouble, basically. And there's a lot of them embedded within programs. There's a lot of little Tommy Tubervilles, and they can easily get they can get triggered basically quickly by Black Lives Matter talk, by things that they shouldn't, if they have such a problem with. It really brings into question why they have such a role, a prominent role in the development and coaching of these young student athletes. Again, as Derek said, it's a joke that term's even used. I mean, quite frankly, if someone's doing the work they're doing for the university, at that level, the amount of hours you put in, the exhaustion your body undergoes, to be able to play a game like football, particularly, and other sports too. But then since we're on football, that is you can't overstate, and it's something that goes beyond just like the just normal jobs too, because it's like, well, bosses are always going to try to exploit their workers, and you got UPS drivers delivering packages and 130-degree trucks and stuff with no AC and stuff. Something different though when you got full pads on and you're banging every day and you're out in the hot sun, especially in the hotter, really hot parts of the country.
And you're not even recognized as a worker. Yeah.
No, you're not even recognized as a worker, and then you're also going to get yelled at and have to run if if you're tired, you oversleep, you miss a class. You're going to get punished. You're going to get, and look, so some of that, it's totally ridiculous. And real quick, before we close, you get a chance to see the Hard Knocks episode doing the Rams and Chargers this year. And I think just one thing that stood out to me is, look, the NFL, players, union is not as strong as the NBA, but like some of the stuff that they did do in July. And, saying Russell Wilson spoke out, even Drew Brees, a lot of others spoke out saying that, we need to have some, clarity on what these protocols are going to be, had an effect in forcing the NFL's hand to make sure they did have the daily testing that you saw, go on there. That if they're going to press forward, is essential. It's the only way you can actually do it without having a massive outbreak. And that's even left to be, determined. We don't know if that's even how long that'll last. But contrast that with college football and these programs, like I was highlighting at Florida State, not releasing, testing data. There's most schools are even doing that. They're releasing the numbers at least, hiding behind HIPAA protections as an excuse. And then the whole notion that even the COVID testing you are doing, they're not getting results back immediately, which is making it like the contact tracing. I mean, the amount of people that have already been infected, it's incalculable. You can't really add up. So these things are all going to keep being issues. Just because it's only been the Big Ten and Pac-12 that canceled so far hardly means it's all said and done. I think that, quite frankly, if this leads to sort of like what David West is doing, and we want to get Danny Highfalling on the show here soon, because from Black Agenda Report, because he interviewed David West recently, former power forward with the Hornets and Pacers, really dynamite player in his heyday with Chris Paul and company, and he's done a lot creating this professional collegiate athletic association, trying to get it up off the ground. And what it would do at least is create something that you can't take out the cartel in the NCAA. At least you got an alternative there that people, the whole idea of amateurism and stuff. And if you want to go to college, great, but go to college and do that if that's really what you want to do, not because you're being coerced into doing it as a condition to be able to pursue football, right? I mean, not to mention, you say you get a free scholarship, and that's what you should be so grateful for. But you talk to so many student athletes, and I know this personally, having been one, that there's so many classes you can't even sign up for, right? There's a conflict with practice. There's so many, you might have study groups, you might have enrichment opportunities or speakers who come to campus, right? Career networking events, right? That you can't go to because you have, from 1 o'clock in the afternoon all the way to almost bedtime, with the exception of study hall that's run at the football facility too. Your day is controlled. So you're not even getting the full value of that education. That's why you see graduation rates are so low. A lot of campuses. I mean, it's, people are being pushed into things that aren't really where their heart is. And they're being told that if you don't get together, it's all, the lack of personal responsibility, a personal failing. And obviously to make them collectively feel as if they don't have the power they in fact do have. So on that note, we can go ahead and, wrap for tonight. I think we opened up a lot of, lanes for combo that need to continue, and this stuff's going to be rapidly developing. So we'll try to hop on and do maybe another one of these later in the week, this week, and kind of react to whatever is sure to unfold in the next few days. So anyways, appreciate y'all being on here, and I'll make sure to get this posted, put some stuff in the show notes. Like I said, shout out to the In the Sport podcast. People are doing some really good work over there, bringing athletes on, talking about their experiences, and kind of, blowing the lid off a lot of this that's going on in college football right now. It's a scandal, and people need to be held accountable, quite frankly. And I've come around to really agreeing on that, and I think it's we're going to see what's happened, but there's been a lot of harm that's already been done, quite frankly, and hope maybe we can get into that and have a conversation with one of them here in the near future too. So appreciate it. Everybody be well, stay safe, and until next time, we'll see you.
Until next time, y'all.
Until next time, be well.